Hey there, Ari here, and I'm here today with a 10.1 Guardian Druid guide. So, as far as tier set goes, Guardian Druid got a very good set bonus, specifically the 2 set, and I would say this is probably the best tier set bonus out of all the tanks. For sure, at least the 2 set is. So, when you take damage, you deal more Mangle and Thrash damage, and your Raze generation is increased. It says 0%, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be 15%. So, essentially, you'll have this up 100% of the time. The duration of 8 seconds doesn't really matter for the most part. You have this 2 set proc up 24/7 inside of M+. Raid might be a little different, but specifically talking about just M+ here. And then the heal for 6% of damage taken over 8 seconds is also quite massive. So you will have a lot of passive healing, and you already had a lot of that from, after the wildfire healing, Loon's Favored if you took it, Leech, and then also your mastery. So you have a lot of passive healing. This adds to that, and it's definitely going to be a good chunk. Nothing like too game changing, but it will definitely feel pretty nice. I think this will help a lot of the Guardian Druids feel comfortable in taking out a Loon's Favored, because I do know a lot of Guardian Druids did not enjoy taking Loon's Favored. They really like the healing from, your Moonfire damage. I didn't find it particularly needed or useful for the most part, because a lot of it is overhealing. Most of the damage that killed me this tier were one-shots, just, heavy magic hits, constant magic hits, I should say, and or bleeds. And the passive healing would not have kept me up in those situations 99% of the time. Maybe for the bleeds it might have, but I would even say 100% of the time it's a misplay on my part in not calling for a healer external, not pressing my own externals, or not pressing Frenzied Regen fast enough, early enough I should say, since it's a bleed dot. Either way, as far as the Mangle and Thrash damage is, nothing too interesting there. It's just, nice to have. Nothing too special for the most part. However, the Rage generation will be quite nice on the lower targets. Anything from 1 to 5 targets, you will definitely feel it. You will have more rage. It will be very, very nice. Anything, like 8 to 10 targets, high number of targets, you won't really feel this too much, because you're already rage capped for the most part. However, we'll get into the 4-piece first. So as far as 4-piece goes, nothing too interesting here. It just increases your Raze maul damage by 20%. And casting ironfur, Raze or maul, increases your max health by 15%. So you'll essentially have 15% increased health at all times. Since you'll be pressing ironfur nonstop, you'll have this up 24/7 inside of an M+ scenario. So going back to the rage generation, this technically can change, like this 4-set can change your playstyle a bit, in that you will most likely be taking Raze now. You will be playing Raze because of the 4-set. And what it will do is it will change how many targets you press Raze at. because when you do take Raze, you have to balance out rage spent between Ironfur and Raze. And that rage, as far as this tier went, in dungeons like, say for example, Algathar, obviously the first pull, you're just rage capped the entire time, pulling all of the little lashers. You just have, full rage. And it would definitely be beneficial to be taking Raze for that pull specifically. That way you can spend more rage while still spamming Ironfur, and that would 100% be a lot more damage. So I'm not entirely sure how many targets you'll be pressing Raze now in order to make sure you still have a lot of Ironfur stacks up. This tier, if you did play the Thorns of Iron, Raze talent build, maximum damage build, which is shown here, you essentially just pressed Raze on Tooth and Claw procs for the most part. That was like the simple way to play it. However, in larger pulls, because you're constantly rage capped, it would be beneficial to be weaving in non-Tooth and Claw proc Razes in order to deal more damage while still spamming Ironfur 24/7. So again, the Algathar pull was a prime example. I personally wasn't able to test this out on higher keys because I just, I felt like I needed the Rage of the Sleeper a lot for pretty much 80% of the dungeons. I needed Rage of the Sleeper to survive quite a few mechanics. I could have maybe played around this by asking for healer externals more aggressively, but who knows. Okay, so this is the 4 set. Again, very strong, very strong 2 set specifically, and the 4 set is good. The 15% increased max health does help. I am not so sure it will be assigned to be stacking mastery. I am 90% certain you will not go down the mastery route. You will still be playing verse for 2 reasons. One, it buffs your damage for Moonfire, for trinkets, etc. Thorns of Iron. Meanwhile, mastery doesn't do that. So, Thorns of Iron and Moonfire is a lot of your damage. So, mastery doesn't help with that. And then the other thing is, and this one is just my guess. I don't have any math on this. But obviously at a certain key level, mastery will not help you as much as verse. Verse is going to infinitely scale with each key level. Not infinitely scale with each key level, but rather it'll scale with each key level. Because, you're taking more damage every key level. And verse will scale with that. Meanwhile, as far as mastery goes, once you're capped out on gear, you're not going to have much more health. So at a certain key level, mastery will stop being useful. Or not will stop being useful, but rather you'll start getting one shot, essentially. You will start getting one shot, and there's nothing you can really do about it. Obviously, they made a change this tier where they are increasing everybody's health pool by 25%. They are also increasing, damage from mobs by 25% as well. That does help a lot of the tanks that have percentage-based healing. So Guardian Druid definitely benefits from that as compared to, prop warriors, prop paladins. I don't think this will change the tank meta, but that's a separate topic. Either way, though, I do think you will still be playing verse haste for the most part, as far as this tier is concerned. All right, now let's jump straight into the builds. So this was the build for this tier. I do think this build is still going to be viable. You can definitely still play this at the start if you know, are comfortable with this. Feel free to continue doing so. However, I do think the, I guess, the meta shift will be a little bit more along the lines of this maximum damage build. Because it sounds like their goal is to make damage less spiky. You will most likely, or not you will most likely, but you will probably have a bit of an easier time running, or not running, Rage of the Sleeper and running Raze. The main reason you wanted Rage of the Sleeper this tier was because there was a lot of hard-hitting one-shot magic attacks. Just a few to name off the top of my head. You know, you have Jade Temple, and let me keep in mind again, it's constant magic hits, okay? Not just, you know, one hit every 1 minute. Those are whatever. Those don't really matter too much because you have SI, you have Barkskin, those are plenty for those. I'm talking about big magic hits every, you know, 8 to 10 seconds. So you had Jade Temple, Notorious Dark Claws and Haunting Gazes, Azure Vault Ice Cutters, Algathar. You had the Bird Boss, the mini boss. The mini boss was like every 8 to 10 seconds actually. Veximus, I'm not going to include in there because that is one of the bosses where he only beams like 30 seconds, every 30 seconds or so. So that one doesn't really matter too much because you would be fine without Rage of the Sleeper for the most part. As long as you called for Healer External on some of them, and you could also line it, so that's whatever. But you get the point. There, every single dungeon had hard-hitting magic tank busters that were frequent. And so you really wanted Rage of the Sleeper, another short 25% DR. Yeah. So I do think I will most likely be running this build, and I will be testing this out in PTR on the last week before 10.1 drops. You can check in on that Friday to see, you know, what build I'm running, how it is. Some of the other builds that a lot of people have been asking me about, no Karn build. So this is the no Karn build. It will do a good amount less damage. As far as this tier was concerned, it did about 10 to 15k less DPS, which is quite significant. I would... Maybe if you were able to play with Thorns of Iron instead of the Rage of the Sleeper, then, you know, it would be a little bit more comparable. But even then, I just don't know how you would survive, because Incarn is a very big defensive. And if you played with Incarn properly, with Ursoc's Guidance specifically, you had Incarn every minute 30 to minute 45. And so you had periods of about a minute where you don't have Incarn. And that's when you would be rotating your defensives, Barkskin, SIs, Rage of the Sleepers. However, I think most bears struggled with getting a lower Incarn. So rather than, you know, trying to survive for 1 minute without Incarn, they probably were trying to survive for more like a minute 30 without defensives. And that can definitely be a struggle. A minute, or, you know, 30 seconds difference is quite a bit. You know, it changes every other pull for you. It definitely hurts. You can't pull as big. Your dungeon just becomes a lot slower, etc. And so I think that's why a lot of people like the no Karn build, because you do have Ursoc's Fury, which provides a good amount of passive healing when you do not have Incarn, or Berserk, I guess, in this case. I do think this build is absolutely viable for, you know, easily anything up to like 22s, 23s currently. It really just depends on what key level, and are you guys, you know, running into a damage check issue. And that will vary throughout the tier, obviously, since people are getting geared up, they don't have as much damage, etc. So it's going to vary throughout the tier. But the question is always, will you ever run into a damage problem? Are you pushing the highest amount at the highest keys kind of thing? If you're trying to push the highest keys, you probably would not want to play this build because it does do less damage. Alright, so jumping into a different build, this is something I actually wanted to try out. This is a build I kind of made up recently. It's a minor change. So I'm taking out Scintillating Moonlight and Galactic Guardian, and Rage of the Sleeper, and I am placing these points into Ellune's Favored. That way I can still get Thorns of Iron, and then I can also get Ursoc's Fury. This build will be less damage, okay, than your Thorns of Iron plus Raze build. However, it should feel more comfortable outside of Incarn, since you have Ursoc's Fury. That being said, you do drop Scintillating Moonlight, which is very sketchy. That's 10% DR on all mobs. Most likely, this will not be a very good build, but it is something I will be testing out. So we'll have to see. Again, I will be testing this out most likely, you know, over the PTR weekend, PTR Plus weekend. All right, now let's jump straight into Guardian Druid, and we'll hop in game. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of go over the rotation, because I know a lot of Guardian Druids have always asked about damage. They're having some damage related issues. They can't figure out how to do more damage, and 99% of the time it's because you're not spamming ironfur enough. So ironfur, as you can see on the tooltip to the left hand side, is on a 0.5 second cooldown. It is not on the global cooldown. You cannot increase or decrease this based on haste. It is just a hard set 0.5 second cooldown. So you will be spamming this 24/7. Now the regular rotation for Guardian Druid inside of Incarn is just Mangle, Thrash, Mangle, Thrash. So it's just Mangle, Thrash, Mangle, Thrash. And here's my rotation tracker. As you can see, it's just Mangle, Thrash, and sometimes you'll get an extra Mangle proc. And so you always want to kind of spam Mangle a couple of times while you're waiting for the GC to come off, because sometimes you will be able to get a second Mangle before the Thrash, and you want that because Mangle generates more rage than Thrash in most cases. I think the times where Thrash will generate more rage is when you have I forgot the number of targets, but you have to have a lot of targets, probably like 10 plus targets. Anyways, so while doing your Mangle Thrash, obviously you want to be spending your rage, and so you will be spamming Thorns of Iron the entire time during that. And it gets a little tiring on your main hand, especially if you have to also kite. So now, instead of just spamming 2 buttons, you're spamming 3 buttons with your main hand if you're doing both Mangle, Thrash, and Thorns of Iron. And then you have to press a 4th button while kiting, okay? So a lot of the times you are kiting as a Guardian Druid. Not a lot of the times, but whenever you do kite. So now you're spamming 4 buttons, and that definitely is very difficult. I don't know how many people can actually do this perfectly. By perfectly, I mean, maintaining their full rotation. It is not easy. I don't know. I know a lot of people might say they can do this, but believe me, you have to be a crackhead to do this. So what I always recommend is to put ironfur on the hand that is not pressing your main rotation. So I use my left hand to do my main rotation, Mangle, Thrash, and then I put ironfur on my mouse, my right hand, and I spam mouse button 4 the entire time inside of Incarn. So as you can see here, I'm just spamming Thorns of Iron the entire time. If you can see on the right side of my screen, you can see that I'm constantly spamming it. Okay? Constantly spamming it. And so this makes it so that you can keep your rage as low as possible, especially in the large pool. So it's very easy right now with 4 targets, but when you start entering the 7 to 10 target pools, it will get extremely difficult to keep your rage uncapped. And so that's why you want to be spamming ironfur with the hand that you are not using for the most part. Okay. Now we'll kind of go into the rest of the rotation. So outside of Incarn, you want to be pressing Mangle if you ever have it. So if it's a gore proc, you use it immediately. After that, it's going to be Thrash because those are your 2 main rage generators. And more rage you generate, more damage through Thorns of Iron. Now, if you do play... Oh, also, obviously, keep Moonfire up 24/7. I guess that should be... So, I know a lot of places will say that is the main priority, to keep Moonfire up first. However, when you enter a pull, you always want to press a defensive, so either Rage of the Sleeper or Bark Skin going into it, and if you don't have those, it better be Incarn or Survival Instincts. Okay, and it might feel bad to be pressing SI, such a big cooldown, entering a pull. You just have to do it, because as a Guardian Druid, if you have no Ironfur stacks, I guarantee you will chunk, if not die, on pull. So basics, first thing, always press the defensive going into a pull. And even for some pulls on my hierarchies, I have to press multiple defensives. I will press both Incarn and Bark Skin, or I'll press Bark Skin plus Rage of the Sleeper. SI is sufficient by itself, obviously. So I will press multiple defensives sometimes. Okay, and then the next thing I do is I will sometimes press Moonfire first when I'm not in melee range. So I press 1 Moonfire. So say, for example, I'm running into this pull, right? I press a Moonfire, I press all my defensives, and the first thing I go press is a Mangle. And the reason why I press a Mangle first is to generate as much rage as I can as fast as possible in order to get my first Ironfur stack out, okay? Again, like I said, if you don't have an Ironfur stack up, you will chunk. So you just Mangle, Thrash, Mangle, Thrash. Now, outside of Incarn, you're still pressing Mangle, Thrash, and then whenever you want to weave in swipes whenever you don't have Mangle or Thrash. Okay? And the only times you use your Galactic Guardian proc is when a Moonfire drops on a target, or your Galactic Guardian proc is not going to trigger by itself. So there are times where Galactic Guardian, if you're unlucky, it will run down to 0. and that's when, when it's like 2 seconds remaining, that's when you want to press it. And then, as you can see here on the right side of my screen, I'll have Tooth and Claw procs. You definitely want to spend these. As far as this tier went, I pretty much, my rule of thumb was, for the most part, even... Okay, so it's a little... If you're talking about maximum damage output, you would be pressing your Tooth and Claw procs even, on, I believe it was 5 to 7 targets. I think it was somewhere around there. However, for me, I kind of made it and the reason why I don't know this is because I pretty much always press my Tooth and Claw procs primarily because of my group composition. We had very poor funneling with an Evoker and S-Priest, and we were running with a Boomkin at the start. He swapped the Feral. Feral does have a funnel, but it's not anything amazing. So we were running a very off-meta comp, and so I would sacrifice some of my overall to do more single target by always pressing a Tooth and Claw proc on the high health targets, because after all, what does it matter when the rest of the mobs die but you still have one mob alive that's sitting at 50% with high health? It's not gonna matter. It's just gonna extend your pull. So what you want to do is you want to kill everything bolstered every single week, regardless of whether it's bolster week. Obviously they're changing bolster. That's great change, by the way, but no matter what, every pack you still want to kill it bolstered. You want to kill everything evenly. That is the most efficient way to do most packs. There are certain packs where you have a prio kill target where you want to kill it as fast as possible. In those situations, obviously, you just kind of focus it down. I will sometimes just do Mangle, Maul when I have extra rage, because my Thrashes are just ticking. So you'll kind of have to figure that out depending on your group comp, but just don't kind of monkey mode, be like, oh, the guy told me to do the maximum amount of damage is this way. That's just not how you... Or rather, doing high damage is good, but you definitely want to make sure that it is the highest group overall, I guess is the best way to put it. If it's not the highest group overall, then you might be inting your group. Not necessarily inting, obviously. I mean, for the most part, you're not a DPS, you're a tank. So, if anything, flame your DPS for not doing more efficient single targeting. Either way, though, just keep that in mind. It's not always, oh, guy told me to press my Tooth and Claw proc at 7 targets, and I'm not going to do it under or below, or under or above, whatever. Just, think about what will be the fastest way to kill the pack, depending on your damage profile of the group. Okay, anyways, I went into that a little too long. Aside from that, I do like to play Bristling Fur a lot of the times. I will use it a little degenerately to get those short Incarns. I don't believe you realistically need to play it. I think it's absolutely fine to play Thorns of Iron. It is kind of hard to calculate the damage you gain from taking Bristling Fur. But for the most part, Brambles was about, I don't know, I would say 3% of my overall whenever I did run it. And I know you can get it a little bit higher, but realistically, I mean, if you're doing higher keys, you can't just be pressing Barkskin on cooldown for damage. That's not very realistic. you need to save bark skin for, you know, when you actually need it. So 30% I think is about right in terms of your overall across the dungeon for your brambles. So as far as bristling fur, it was about I think it was around 10 to 15% of my rage generation on some of the higher density dungeons. Not necessarily higher density, but usually it's higher density dungeons where I'll get more use out of it. But it's more so of when can you get the most use out of it, because obviously you generate rage based on the amount of damage you take. So high damaging dungeons like Jade Temple, say for example, hard hits in short periods of time, you will get a lot of value out of it. Compared to other dungeons like maybe Nakud, which has a bit more of a linear damage profile. So it'll be not as great. But Bristling Fur is still going to be good. I'd imagine with the increased rage generation from the 2 sets and me still running Bristling Fur this year, I could probably get my Incarn down to about minute 15. In, you know, in most dungeons that have a decent sized pulls. So, you know, your Nakuds, your Halls of Valor, things like that. And that will be pretty significant, in my opinion. I do think you will still be running Incarn this tier, as far as pushing high keys. Once again, any build works for 20 keys. Anything up to a 20, you can play any build you want. If you want to play the more tanky build, by all means, go for it. I think that probably would be a better idea as well if you're, you know, new to Guardian Druid or getting back into Guardian Druid, whatever the case might be. Playing a tankier build is always safer. For the most part, there shouldn't be any damage checks for 20s. Obviously, I don't know how pugging is at 20s. Or rather, I don't have extensive experience pugging 20s, so I'm not going to speak in regards to that. I have heard some terrible stories where, you know, DPS are doing tank damage, so who knows. Alright. I've kind of gone over most of the rotation. That's going to the majority of the rotation. I know I didn't really go over when to use Rage of the Sleeper. For the most part, Rage of the Sleeper, I use as a defensive in most dungeons. However, you can definitely use it for damage. If you want to use it for damage, I would definitely try to line it up with trinkets as much as you can. Otherwise, you know, just pop it with Incarn. Should be absolutely fine. And then, let me see. Oh, I guess for Raze builds. Okay, so for Raze builds, the rotation is very similar. It's just what I kind of spoke to at the start. At a certain number of targets, you know, you will be rage capped, and that's when you want to be spamming. So you'll be spamming Mangle, Thrash until you have 3 stacks of Thrash, and then you'll be spamming Mangle, Raze, and you'll only press Thrash when you know, Thrash is about to fall off. So you want to be pressing Mangle, Raze the entire time while still spamming ironfur. Example again is Algathar's Academy, that first pull. You have infinite rage during that, so you want to spend as much rage as possible. So Mangle, Raze the entire time. So that's the only real change in terms of rotation. All right. I'll try to put that description as far as the rotation goes, or I'll try to put the rotation in the description below. We are now going to talk a bit about gear, stats, and trinkets. So again, as far as stats are concerned, most likely it'll still be Verse and Haste. Haste helps with your Thrash bleed ticking, your Moonfire dot ticking, and every single time your Thrash ticks, it will generate Rage, so your Blood Frenzy. And then that means more Rage generation. That ties into Ursoc's Guidance. Every turning Rage you spend, it reduces your Incarn by a second. And that's how you get shorter Incarns. So Haste is a defensive stat as well as an offensive stat. It is a big factor in getting shorter Incarns. So yeah, just keep that in mind. Haste is not just an offensive thing. And then Verse, obviously, you know, both offensive and defensive, increases your damage with everything. Also defensive, reduces damage you take. Nothing to say there. Now, as far as trinkets go, I haven't taken too much of a look into all of the trinkets yet. There are still some dungeon trinkets, you know, I still kind of have to take a look through. But, let me see. Give me a second. Let me find it. As far as M+ trinkets go, if nothing has changed from the past couple of weeks, and I know things have changed. Okay, I know things have changed. I just haven't dove into all the changes yet, so I'm not sure if they changed anything for Harlan's Loaded Dice. But this trinket will be probably one of the best dungeon trinkets. So if you want to hunt for dungeon trinkets, that will most likely be a very safe pick. Probably one of your BIS dungeon trinkets. And then as far as raid trinkets go, I've been looking through the vendor. I haven't been able to test all of them out yet, but just from reading through them, I'd imagine the what is it? This ominous chromatic essence is probably a very safe trinket. It's just a stat stick. It's like the icon from this tier, so should be pretty good if you have multiple people in your party using it. Absolutely fine. And then you also have Netherian's Call to Suffering. This one, I'm not too sure how good it'll be yet, but it is a main stack proc. It has Verse on it, so that part is very, very nice. Obviously you suffer some shadow damage, but it's over a duration, so it should be pretty negligible. But for most of these trinkets, it's just gonna depend on the proc per minute. So I don't know what the procs per minute are for a lot of these trinkets yet. I will have to test them tomorrow. And then I'll try to get back to everybody on that with another video. We also had Beacon to the Beyond, this one. I believe this trinket comes from one of the bosses, end bosses in Raid, both of these bosses, or both of these trinkets, I believe they come from, I think this one comes from the end boss. This one might come from a middle boss, considering it's 424 and this one is 431. Not entirely sure. Don't quote me on it. These are raid trinkets though. This one, the 561 mastery, probably going to be pretty useless if things stay the same, that is. So the stat for this one is pretty whatever. However, if you are running a build that takes in Fury of Nature and Ellune's Favored, I'd imagine they do get buffed by that, by Beacon to the Beyond, from what I last recall. And that will be a 30% increase in this trinket's damage, which is a good amount. In addition to, you know, your Rage of the Sleeper and Verse. So you will probably get quite a lot out of this trinket. Definitely something you may want to take a look into. I'm not so sure it's worth changing your talent tree for, though. Again, there are some builds that do take Loons Favored. I would have to test them out. Like I said, I did make one where I don't take Scintillating Moonlight. Not a fan of doing that, but who knows? You know, maybe later down the line they change up the talent tree for Guardian Druid, because I do think the tree still is kind of weird. There are a lot of talents that kind of don't make sense. I think there are certain nodes that are 2-pointers that, you know, really feel bad. But that's for a separate video. And then as far as weapons go, we obviously have the new unique weapon, the rare Jarin. I don't know how to pronunciate it, but it's the Pillar of the Elder Flame. I haven't really been able to test this yet, but the damage on use looks pretty weak. I'd imagine it's only an increase of about like 2 to 3% overall in an M+ dungeon. That being said, I mean, it is free. It's kind of like your Aeronog rings. They still have, you know, their stats on them, so you don't lose anything. It's just an extra on use. Essentially, you get it for free. So this will still be BIS. Essentially, free 2 to 3% damage. It's very similar to the Aeronog ring from the first raid boss this tier. Would try to get if you can. Otherwise, don't fret. It's not going to be anything game-changing. And then speaking on the rings, to my understanding currently, the Onyx Amulet is BIS for quite a while until you get, I want to say, max mythic eye level rings. But if you have the Aeronog ring, you might replace it slightly earlier. However, both the Aeronog ring and the Onyx Amulet will be BIS, at least for early mid-tier of 10.1. So if you have those, congrats. For those who cannot get the rare ring, you may want to consider crafting a 418 ring currently. When 10.1 launches, all your crafted pieces will turn into 421 retroactively. You want to do anything, it's automatic. So for any of you guys who still have sparks, definitely take a look into crafting some 418 pieces before 10.1 drops. You might be able to craft them in 10.1 still, and they'll turn to 421s. I'm not sure about that, but just to be on the safe side, you may want to craft it early. Okay, this video went on a little longer than I'd like to, so I'm going to end it there. I will make an additional video on Profession, some of the new like upgrade things. So that will be non-bear related. And then just want to apologize to some of the EU viewers for the most part, because you guys haven't been able to catch my stream lately. For those who don't know, I am kind of just taking a break until 10.1. And then once 10.1 kicks in, I will be back to streaming, you know, those late degen NA hours. So EU viewers should be able to catch me in the early morning / afternoon. Yeah, that's pretty much about it. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.